So let me do a quick introduction of the different kinds of lacquer thinners. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and I'm going to talk about lacquer thinners, particularly because there seems to be some confusion about lacquer paints, lacquer thinners, what they can work with, because lacquers have quite often been described as acrylic lacquers. And then when you hear acrylic, you think water-based, right? But that's not the case. So let me do a quick introduction of the different kinds of lacquer thinners. Lacquer thinner in general is just lacquer thinner. It's used for cleaning up lacquer paints. So that's this one here. Just for example, that's the GSI version. Now Tamiya also make a version of that one, which is that one there. So they're essentially the same thing. And there's quite a few different brands that make essentially the standard lacquer thinner. Now there are also some specialist thinners. This one here, which is the leveling thinner. This is quite popular at the moment because it's got a leveler added to it. Leveler being a retarder, it actually slows down the drying time. So that's a slow dry, that's a regular dry, and then also there's a rapid thinner as well. So rapid has other additives which make it dry quicker. Now, for most of us, the standard one is fine. It does pretty much everything, and that's pretty much what we used throughout all the time that lacquers have been around. It's just a recent addition that there's a slower drying one and a faster drying one. Now, the slower drying one is great for getting a much smoother surface. So basically, with the leveling description there, it's allowing the paint to have some time to settle, meaning it flattens off before it dries, meaning it'll give you a better gloss finish. So this works best for gloss type paints. Now, this is your purpose, does everything, and then the rapid one, it dries much quicker. So basically, it's allowing the paint to dry soon after it hits the surface, meaning it doesn't have time to swirl around. So this is recommended for matte paints, where you want that very dusty, quick dry look, and also metallics, because sometimes metallics, if you allow them to dry too long with a wet coat, what's going to happen is the metallics actually swirl around and they leave swirl marks within the actual paint finish. So that's where that works best. Okay, so that's describing the three different types of thinners. Now I'll move these aside and we'll look at the paints that are designed to work with them. So obviously with lacquer thinners, you use those with lacquer paints. So I've got three different types of lacquer paints right here. So we've got the SMS paints here, which is actually pre-thinned, ready for airbrushing. But if you want to thin them further, you use lacquer paints, lacquer thinners. This one here is by GSI, and then we have the Tamiya version one here as well. Okay, so basically you'll use lacquer thinners for either thinning further, so you can spray it through an airbrush, or if you want to make wash effects, or for cleaning up. Now we'll talk about the description of acrylic lacquer and help you understand why it's called that. So lacquer is actually a solvent-based paint. The base itself is a very strong smelling organic solvent, and then the acrylic factor of it is the pigment is an acrylic made pigment. So the acrylic part of it doesn't actually mean it's a water-based acrylic. So these particular paints, if you add water to them, will seize up and go all gluggy. So these have to use lacquer-based thinners. Now, moving on from there, you've got these ones. Now these add to the confusion because these are actually water-based paints, but these are a special hybrid water-based paint. These are actually alcohol-based and designed to use with water or with lacquer thinners. So of all the paints, the alcohol type ones will work with lacquer thinners. Now, I've got so that's the actual acrylic type thinner. It comes in a similar sort of bottle. These are your standard lacquer thinner. Now, both of these thinners will work with these particular alcohol-based acrylics. Now, why would you want one over the other? Okay, so, well, the first advantage of these particular paints is because they're water-based, they're easy to clean up with water. Secondly, they've got alcohol in them, so they dry very quickly. Now, if you're very sensitive to smells, they're low odor, so that's an advantage. And if you're airbrushing, then you'll use the water-based type thinner, which is this one, and then you'll have low odor spraying as well. Now, if you want to use lacquer thinners with them, the advantage of lacquer thinners is it'll help the drying time. It'll dry faster, so you'll be able to move onto different coats quicker. The other advantage is they tend to feel a little bit tougher. But your disadvantage is you're going to have that very strong lacquer smell. So that's the hybrid type acrylic paint, which is here. So from my knowledge, it's basically Tamiya and GSI that make that style hybrid. Now over here, I've got acrylic paints, which is a Scale75 and the Vallejo. Now these ones are what I would call artist true water-based paints. So these ones will only work with their specified thinners or with water. And these particular types cannot be used with any type of lacquer thinner at all. So these would be like applying water-based or water into a lacquer. They'll seize up. So these are no good. So I'll give you a quick demonstration, just so visually you see what's happening here. So let's start off with the ones that are compatible. Now over here, I've got a bit of standard thinner, which I've already got put into a little container. This one here, I've got acrylic thinner. And then we're gonna open up some bottles and I'll show you what happens. Okay, so let's go with this one here. So I've got some SMS paint here. So we've got Have Glass Grey. Let's just open it up, something we've used before. Okay, let's just get a little bit out here. Pick up the cap. All right, so I'm just going to add a touch there. I'm just going to clean it up by putting it into this thinner. So you see how it's cleaning off very, very easily, because this is the correct lacquer thinner for the lacquer paint. Right, so let's just get it in there. Wipe it off. This rag. Okay, so you see there, this is the brush, it's all clean. Okay, let's just pop that back out of the way. Okay, so I've got my little sample there of SMS. Okay, let's get a little sample here. I'm going to open this up of a hybrid. So this is the GSI water base. It's got alcohol in it. Let's put that there. Okay, now you see that I can use the regular water-based thinner. See how it's cleaning up? Like so. Or you can use the lacquer thinner. So, let's pop it in here. Wipe it off here. Okay, so you see how both of those thinners work for that particular type of paint. Okay, now let's show Vallejo. Pop the Vallejo right there. Okay, so obviously the Vallejo is going to work with water or its own thinner, which I don't have here, but that's mainly there to show you what's going to happen when I add the lacquer thinner to it. Okay, so let me just get a fresh container here. So we've got some fresh lacquer thinner there. Pop it all in there. Doing this simply because the first one I've used as a cleaning jar, and this is going to give me some fresh liquid. We'll do the same with the water base. A little bit more. All right, so I've got that one there. All right, actually this one's just about dry, so I should have made a double line of this stuff. Let's just do that now. Put that there. It's a bit heavier, let's recoat that. Alright, so we're just cleaning it up the same way as before. Actually, I probably don't need to get a bit more of that. Let's just spread that over here. Okay, I'll keep this brush for lacquers, and then I'll use this new one just to demonstrate what's going to happen to this Vallejo. Okay, let's try with the lacquer thinner. So across the top I'll add the lacquer thinner. So I add a drop, add a drop to this, add a drop to this, add a drop to this, and then I mix through them. So as you see there, lacquer thinner has thinned the actual lacquer paint. Absolutely no problem there. Lacquer thinner with the alcohol-based Tamiya or GSI paint. Absolutely no problem there. Let's just clean this off before I do the Vallejo. So the Vallejo being a pure artist type water-based. See what happens here. It's quite interesting. So it hasn't seized up. Let's pop in some more here. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So this is not what I expected. So this is Vallejo that's been thinned with lacquer thinner, and it appears to be working fine. Okay, actually I've forgotten this one. Let's try Scale75. It's got me intrigued now. Actually, I've just contaminated this fresh thinner there. I'll get another one. All right, let's get another container of some lacquer thinner, and we'll try the Scale75. Oh, so lacquer thinner. Okay, so this is actually quite interesting for me because I would not have thought that lacquer thinner would work with these acrylic paints, and as you see it here, it appears to be working fine. It is drying incredibly quickly, but it's mixed and it's smooth. So there you go. All right, so we learned something new. Now I think I'll still continue to test these at a later stage to see how they go through an airbrush per se, but that's all dried up. Seems good. Okay, let's do our next test, which is, this is the alcohol-based acrylic thinner, and we'll try it on each of these again. So I'm putting a drop onto the lacquer, onto the acrylic, onto the Vallejo, then also, actually let's try another one. We'll do this, And we'll get some fresh Scale 75 onto there. Okay, let's see what happens. Right, so this is with the lacquer paint. Hasn't liked that at all, that's all seized up. No, that is not compatible at all. Okay, so let's wipe that off. Try and get rid of this green as well. It's giving a rough idea of something else. All right, let's go with the acrylic. So as expected, that's working perfectly. And this is a thinner that's designed for these Tamiya or GSI acrylic paints. This is with the Vallejo. Now that appears to be working fine. All right, so that's intrigued me again. All right, just cleaning off with some acrylic thinner. All right, and this is Scale 75. Okay, so there's my demonstration of lacquer thinners and different acrylics. Now the whole idea was to show you the differences between the lacquer thinners, and quite honestly I thought it was going to affect these particular artist type acrylics worse than it actually did. It actually appeared to work very well. So in summary, we've got our lacquer thinners. Now lacquer thinners has worked obviously with the lacquer paints we have here. It works with the alcohol-based acrylics, which we have there, and it's worked with the Vallejo, and it's also worked with the Scale 75. Now with the water-based alcohol thinners, that has not worked with the lacquer, that's seized it up, but it has worked obviously with these alcohol-based acrylics, which it's designed for, and it's also worked with the Vallejo and also the Scale 75, which is a big shock actually for me, but it opens up a lot of options. So I hope that's been informative. It's certainly been educational for myself. I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and we'll continue exploring what else we can do with these. So thank you for watching.